everybody, and thank you for joining me on my podcast, Love You, Live You, with myself as host, Kathleen Heim. I have a very amazing guest today that I'm super excited to have on this show. Before I introduce her, let me begin with a few questions. Do you wake up every morning feeling exhausted and drained? Are you tired of hearing all the things that you need to be doing to get your life back on track? Are you desperately ready for a break, to escape just for a little while? Do you catch yourself thinking that there must be more in life than this? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then you won't want to miss listening to my next guest. My guest today is the founder of Chic Life and an international author and a simplicity expert. After spending almost 2 decades in a high-functioning, award-winning executive, she experienced a life-changing event that forced her to stop and ask the question, what if there's a better way to live? Sought for expert comment by media globally, she's been featured in podcasts, experienced a life-changing event that forced her to stop and ask the question, what if there is a better way to live? Sought for expert comment by media globally, she's been featured in podcasts, Facebook Live, YouTube, blog articles, print media, live TV, and radio. She is a highly accomplished businesswoman. She's received 2 nominations, not 1, but 2 nominations for the 2019 Top Female Author Awards. She was awarded the prestigious Exceptional Woman in Excellence Award by Women Economic Forum in 2019. She's a previous winner in the Telstra Business Woman of the Year Awards, and she was one of the youngest ever winners of the WA Business News 40 Under 40 Awards. While not working, she can be found in nature, on the yoga mat, lost in a great book, or hanging out with her husband and cat, or creating magic in her kitchen. So here to help us find another way to live, please join me in welcoming speaker, author, and rampant rule breaker. Want to hear more about that? Massive welcome to our simplicity expert, Bronwen Sciortino. Thank you, Bronwen, for joining us. I am honored to have you here on the
Kathy,
podcast.
I'm so privileged to be here with you today, and I cannot wait to see where our conversation takes us.
I feel the same. Now, I was fortunate to meet Bronwen, who I'm in Los Angeles and she's in Australia. And I've never been to Australia. So what part of Australia are you from?
I'm in Perth, Western Australia.
So now it's 4 o'clock Los Angeles time, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, but it's 7 o'clock in the morning or a little before that for Bronwen. So thank you so much for getting up early and going with us. I was fortunate enough to meet Bronwen recently in Los Angeles at a Master of Talents showcase that featured speakers, keynote speakers, and Bronwen really touched my soul in her speech. She's an author, like I mentioned in her introduction, and Bronwen, simplicity expert. So talk to us about your books, but first let's talk about what is a simplicity expert and how did you get here?
So probably the easiest way to answer that is let's talk about how I got here first. I spent, as you said in your introduction, I spent almost 2 decades in a high achieving roles, in the corporate world, and I was pretty good at what I did. I won awards, and none of that meant anything. I was so far removed from who I am, and had no connection to who I was as an individual anymore. And so I just basically went through every day in a daze. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing, and I just pushed myself, to the extreme for far too long. And then one day, I was at my GP just for a normal checkup, and a diagnosis of, psoriasis, a little patch of like an eczema type thing on my head. maybe that's not psoriasis anymore. Maybe that's actually skin cancer. We need to go and get this checked out. So I went to a dermatologist, and he said, "Yep, not skin cancer, not psoriasis. It's skin cancer, and you're going to need plastic surgery." So for normal people, that would have spun their life, in a second. For me, I was just annoyed because I had to try and schedule something else into my day. I was so wrapped up in looking after everybody else and living my life to make sure everybody else was okay that I couldn't even give myself the time that I needed to look after, a significant, impost in my life. So I gave myself half a day to have 6 centimeters of my head removed, and then I was back on my laptop and I was working again, looking after everybody else. And then when I went back to the surgeon about 3 or 4 days later for my post-operative checkup, they're taking all the staples and the stitches and the bandages off the wound on my head. And suddenly, for the first time, I saw my reflection, and it was like seeing a quarter of my head missing. And in that moment, it was just a massive shock delivered through my system. And that shock flipped me into a completely different reality. And it became like everyone around me was living life, and I was stuck in this void where I could see everything happening around me, but everything I knew about myself and my life had completely disappeared. So I had people asking me questions, and I couldn't cognitively process what they were asking me. I couldn't understand, what I was seeing, what I was hearing, what I was feeling, and it was like life was moving literally around me, and I was stuck. And I, for the first time in my life, I couldn't just click my fingers and have a solution in front of me. And that started a journey for me of 2 years of the most invasive and intensive and overwhelming work, just to be able to, really get myself back to being able to live in the basics in life. And from there, it was another 12 months of that work before I knew who I was and where I was going, but most importantly, how I wanted to live while I was doing that. And during that first 2 years, that one of my counselors discovered that I was terrified of writing anything personal down. And so when you're in that sort of situation, and a counselor or a psychologist discovers that you're terrified of something, it becomes homework. So I went home, and it took me 3 weeks to write one word on a page. That's how scared of it I was. And around about the same time, I was just putting my toe in the water to go back into social situations and to start, interacting with life again. And it had been 9 to 12 months recovery at this point. And most people I'd literally just dropped off the face of the earth. And most people hadn't seen me for that amount of time. And they're like, where have you been? What have you been doing? And because I was so fragile and so raw, the only thing I could talk about was this journaling. And as I started to talk about what I was journaling, people started saying, you have to write a book. The world needs this. You've got to get this out there because the world really needs to heal. And so that initially was very overwhelming for me because I was so broken. But eventually it became a little bit of a project that allowed me to put my toe back into the water to actually doing something that was a little bit more in a work format. And so my first book was written through my recovery process. And then as that went out into the world, people were like, oh, we need this. How else can we work with you? What else can we do? What else have you got for us? And so that then created this space in front of me where I stepped in, and Chic Life was born. And now I basically teach people how to get rid of the noise and complexity in their life so that they can step in and find the simplest path in what they want to do and how they want to do it.
Wow, that is amazing. And what I love is that you've taken a personal challenge, a personal struggle, and you've made it a strength. And not only have you made it your strength, you're using you're basically burying your soul through your words in this book to help other people gain that strength also. And I think that's amazing. Talk to us about your book and what your book is about, and what does it teach people, and how does it help them live that more simpler life that unfortunately you had to go through such a struggle in order to get there.
I think, so Keep It Super Simple is the first book that I wrote, and that was the one that was written in my recovery. And that really was me just bearing my soul and trying to understand how I got to where I got to. What were the things in my life that you know, I guess collectively pushed me over the edge? And it's things like, you know, I ended up writing about things like being busy, our comfort zones, spirals, and the way that we get stuck in the spirals in life, and how we can make choices to just step out of them. Change, what happens within us, you know, when we're actually changing, and why are we so afraid of change, and why do we think that change is so hard, and what can we do to understand change differently so that we can actually make moving our lives in a different direction so much, you know, more easy. All of those sorts of things, but also things like what are the resources and the tools that we have around us that are really easily accessible. Things like music and you know, being able to say no and those sorts of things that we can just really easily, you know, grasp so that we can do things differently in a really easy way.
Yeah, I love that. And it is about being easy, because let's face it, anything that takes a lot of work, we're a little bit resistant to. And you talked about change. A lot of time we're resistant to change. And you touched on a lot of things, and you talked about being busy. And you and I have talked about this. We are all too flippin' busy, right?
Yep.
I call it that hamster wheel of life. We're going around and around and around. But what are we accomplishing? What are we doing? Where are we going? And again, you said comfort zones. It's our comfort zone. We're comfortable in that life. But we do have choices.
Yep.
We all have choices. And I think we forget that we have choices. It's a choice if we want to be that busy. It's a choice. And you talked about change. People are resistant to change. Why are they resistant? Like you said, because it's hard. And you're saying, it's not that hard. I have a way to make it simple. I have a way to make it easy.
Yeah.
Would you share with our listeners just maybe one or two or three things from your book or books about how you can make changes in your life simply?
Yeah. So I think, firstly, in the book, you know, every chapter has a little section at the end of it where you can actually, there's the exercises and questions that you can ask so that you can actually easily do this for yourself. Because I think there's a lot of material out there that helps you get to your aha moment, but then you get stuck in them. And so, you know, my wish for my work was that it would take whoever has that work in their hands past that aha moment. So the really important thing is that you understand that moment. You just go, oh my goodness, I can't believe that I have never seen this before. How could I not have seen this about my life? And in the book, I call that the forehead slap city moment, you know. You know, and you know, I love that, because I think one of the best ways that you can actually move forward in your life differently is to actually see the humor in what's happening in your life. We're so hard on ourselves. You know, and that little voice that we have in our head, I like to call her the inner bitch, you know, and my inner bitch was so nasty. So really get to know the voice in your head, and is it being kind or is it being really malicious? You know, because mine was really malicious and she kept me down, you know. And it'd be simple things like, you know, I'd trip over something, it's like, you're such an idiot. And you know, you drop something, oh, you're such a klutz, or that sort of stuff. You know, or you're useless, or that was such a stupid thing to say, or, you know, nobody thinks that you're worthwhile. Those sorts of comments that you've got running in your head, they will actually form, you know, the reality of your life. So you need to really get kind to yourself. find that kindness and that voice in your head. And when they, you can't just separate from that voice in your head, it's a part of you. But what you can do is have a conversation with that voice and really start to get it to tone down in what it's saying and change what it's saying. So, when you trip over and it says, you're so clumsy, you just go, actually, no, there was just a thing there I tripped over. Just really calm that conversation down.
I love that, because we are oftentimes our biggest critic, right?
Yep. Yeah.
And I agree with you. Our thoughts become our words, becomes our actions, becomes our destiny. And we don't realize how powerful our thoughts are. And what if, like you said, we could just change them, just give them a little simple tweak, like you said, very simple, very easy, tweak them to our benefit, right? So,
and with a smile.
And with a smile. And you said humor. I love that, because my motto is flexibility, adaptability, and a sense of humor. I learned that in the police academy, and that's the way you do it. And I carry that through my life, because it's so true. Don't take it, it's not that serious.
No.
It's not that serious. Let's have fun with it. And even if you do, I spill a drink. Okay, I'm going to tell you, I probably break a glass and spill a drink every single day.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, it's like, oh, mazel tov. There you go.
Totally right.
What am I going to do? And I'm not clumsy. It just happens.
It just happens.
It just happens. And being nice and like loving yourself first. You said that. Be nice to yourself. Be kind to yourself. We are so hard on ourselves. We live in a society. I don't think it really matters where you live, that we just have so many expectations that are placed upon us. And we have this innate desire as women in particular to live up to those, what we consider, or we've been conditioned to believe are in our standards. So just like you said, change your mindset. So, being a woman who's gone through, a life-changing event, 6 centimeters, cancer taken out of your head, you look in the mirror and everything changes. And I got goosebumps right now when I say it, everything changes.
Yeah.
What advice, whether or not there's a life-changing event, or whether there is, what advice, well, let me just side note, this podcast is about women, empowering women. How can we help you, me, everybody, help women, that may be in our shoes or similar shoes, get through it? So what advice would you give somebody who's living that life, that very complicated, I'm not living for me, the inner bitch? I love that, by the way. How do you shut that bitch down? So
firstly, you don't need to shut her down. Firstly, just embrace her and love her, right? Because she is a part of you. So if you shut her down, you're shutting down a part of yourself. And actually, all that's doing is just squashing and molding yourself again, in ways that people have told you. Because she's not right, she's not wrong, she's not anything other than there. And when you look at it like that, and it's about empowering yourself to really know who you are. So the first thing you can do is look in the mirror and really look into your own eyes. And if what is looking back at you, you do not know, then you have disconnected from yourself at some point. So it's about really getting to know that person in the mirror again, that person behind your eyes that's looking back at you. So the first place that you can start, and this is something that's in my second book, which is The Economy of Enough, there's actually this exercise in there, is do the I am exercise. So start writing down who you are. And it's just, it's a little love heart with little spokes off it. And you just start writing in the middle of it. In the middle of the love heart says I am, and the little spokes are all the things that you are. And just have a look at where you go with that, because what will happen is you'll write down the things that you think that everybody else thinks you're okay with, and you'll leave off the things like I'm intelligent, I'm knowledgeable, I have wisdom, I'm all those things, because they're things that we've been taught are big noting. If we say those, we're big noting ourselves. So really start to understand who you are. Start to write down those things that you know are true about yourself, but make you squirm a little bit, because if you say them, people will think that you're on yourself, or you've got tickets on yourself, or you're big noting yourself. but own those things. Because if you don't own those things, you are denying your greatness. And when you deny your greatness, it's like having all of your girlfriends over and asking everybody to bring a plate of food for the buffet table, and everybody turns up with a plate of boiled white rice. And the buffet is bland, and everybody walks up to the buffet and says, "Oh, isn't this fabulous? We're going to have such a great lunch." And in your mind, you're all thinking, "Oh man, we've all done the same things. It's going to be so boring." If you don't show up with your greatness, the buffet is boring. Show up with your greatness, and every single one of you shows up with your greatness, and suddenly you have the most amazing buffet, and everybody in your world, so everybody that's there for the brunch or the lunch or whatever it is, suddenly gets to experience the most exotic flavors, the most amazing combination of life, because you've turned up in your greatest form.
So what I hear you saying, Bronwen, is that for women, take that deep look at yourself and do the work in your book, and be okay with in Australia they use a different term here, bragging about yourself. Be okay.
Oh no,
with this.
Yeah, we use that too. Yeah.
Okay. So be okay with that. And it's uncomfortable for a lot of us because we have learned to humble ourselves and to, oh yeah, well, that's great white rice. Well, it's really not that good. It's just white rice, like really downing ourselves for our talents, for our strengths. So how did that feel for you as you started doing that work and you started stepping out into that uncomfortable zone of acknowledging? And you said it was hard to write, so I'm thinking maybe you wrote it down on something first.
Oh, yeah, I typed it straight into the computer. Yeah, so, for me that was easiest for me. But yeah, I think really difficult. But also for me, I was coming from ground zero. When I broke, it was like shattering into a million pieces. And for me to heal, I had to pick up every single piece that had shattered, look at it, and I mean every piece. That's all the pieces that had been hidden, the things that people had told me weren't right about me, that were wrong, that were bad about me, all of those things. I had to look at every single piece because I was in a million pieces. It was the absolute extreme for me. I had to start from scratch and rebuild from ground zero up. I think one of the biggest things that I talk to people about now is there's this belief that we hold that you have to wait for the traumatic event before you're allowed to change. Something that I hear a lot is it's okay for you because you had cancer. It's okay for you because you had a breakdown. So it's like people are saying to me, it's all right for me to live differently because, I had to. It's like people are saying to me, I haven't had that. I don't have permission to do things differently. But doing things differently is a choice. Even though I broke and I had to put myself back together again, I could have put myself back together in the same way and gone back and done exactly what I was doing before. I chose not to. So I think, it is a choice exactly where you are now in life. And this is probably one of the hardest things to hear. Exactly where you are in life right now is from your choices. And all it takes is a couple of little choices to do things differently in a slightly different way, and you will significantly change where your life is going. You don't have to change everything to make a difference.
And I think that's a misconception that a lot of people have, that they do have to, choices. We all do have a choice. That is not a misconception. That's the truth. And our life, the end result is based on those choices. And you're right. They don't have to be big, life-changing, earth-shattering choices. It could be just a simple choice. So, maybe what you choose to drink, if you choose to exercise, if you choose, you can start getting bigger from that. But just choices that we make every day, the little choices, they add up. And they don't take a lot of effort. And so I'm really, really wanting, if you're willing to share more about how it felt when your life was shattered.
Yeah. Oh, when my life was shattered.
Yeah, you said, I really, Bronwen, that's so empowering when you say that. I was in pieces on the ground shattered.
Yeah,
And
I couldn't get up.
put
I
myself
couldn't
back
get. I could not get up. I could not stop crying. So I went from, you got to understand, I went from a high achieving, award winning executive to on the floor, unable to cope in everyday life and unable to stop crying. So it was, I could hardly leave the house because I could not physically or mentally cope with people around me. If I left the house, it was to go for a walk on my own or to go and see one of my counsellors. That was it. I went from fully functioning to completely dependent overnight, like within seconds, within a minute. Um, it was incredibly intensive. For me to heal, I literally had to, I guess, go from being a person who thought they had everything under control. My life was mapped out. I knew where I was going. I knew what I was doing. I knew what the next step was, all of those things, to this void of nothing, and not having any clue how to find my way forward or what direction to take a step in. It was terrifying, and I think the biggest realization for me is that when you're in the very depths of the pit, when you're in the very depths of that situation, it's lonely, it is terrifying, it's dark, it is directionless, and there is one question that you are faced with that is the absolute basics of life. Life does not get more simple than this question. And that question is, do you want to live or do you want to die? That's it. That is the simplicity of life. And once you start to answer that question, and obviously I chose to live because I'm here, but then the next question comes, well, how are you going to do that? Well, how do you want to live? Are you going to live the same way? Are you going to live differently? And what that taught me is that the simplest path through life is really finding the simple questions that give you simple answers. And that's what I've really tried to infuse in my books, is the way that you can just use simple questions to find your next step. And every step just leads you to the next question. And I think that the easiest pathway I've found through that is to just allow your answer to stand. So whatever the answer is, it doesn't matter. An answer is not right or wrong. And I think this is where we get ourselves caught up in complexity and noise, in that we get ourselves an answer and then we suddenly try to make a judgment around whether or not that's good, bad, right, wrong, acceptable or not. And then we try to find all the reasons why it's acceptable, even if the answer's wrong. And we get ourselves so caught up in what we're doing that we don't realize that the simplicity of the answer just gives us the next step. So if you just let the answer stand, and it's like, even if you don't feel like you've been the best version of yourself in something that's just happened. So say you've just had a conversation with your mum or your sister or whoever, and that conversation didn't go well. And you start going into that, I should have said this and I should have said that, and that would have shut them down and that would have shut them up and it would have done this and it would have done that. That's the complexity and the noise. Instead, it's just, did that conversation go the way I wanted it to? Yes or no? And if it's yes, it's like, great. End of it. Just move on. If the answer's no, then it becomes, I wonder what I could have done differently. It doesn't have to go down the track of, but she said this and I said that, but if she'd said this, I could have said that, or I should have said this, or that's the noise and the complexity coming in. If it's just no, then it becomes, I wonder what I could have done differently. And then if you start to give yourself an inquiring, loving mind, it just makes it so much simpler to move down that path. So just make questions and loving questions, the way forward, rather than that noise and complexity and that inner bitch getting her say.
I love that term, inner bitch, but and the noise. I agree with you. We all have that noise. It's the second guessing, the nonsense chatter of doubting ourselves. And it sounds like your teachings, your coaching, your book are all about how to, connect with your own self.
Yeah.
In order to eliminate that chatter. So it's not even background noise. It's completely gone. Just being okay with your decisions, and regardless of what they are.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah. And I think also the other big one is judgment. We are taught to judge others to determine where we're at in our lives. We look at someone, and particularly as women, right? And I always say, when you walk into a room, say you go into a networking event, you walk into a room, and the first thing you do is you check someone's hair, what they're wearing, whether or not they're wearing an engagement ring, whether the engagement ring is bigger, better, brighter than yours, if you don't have one, therefore you've made a comparison to yourself against them. Then you're checking their shoes, and then you're asking, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, you bring up that judgment, and that's a big thing for me. I think that's, I was asked this in a podcast, and what do you think is the world's biggest injustice? To me, it's judgment.
Yeah.
Because the opposite is acceptance. And I often wonder what choices we would make as far as friendships, companions, lovers, marriages, if we were unable to see.
Yeah.
Who would you choose? So try
Yeah.
to see with your soul,
Yeah.
Versus judging people. And you're right, we do it, and that inner bitch, she might be doing that, but stopping it. What you're saying is, check it at the door.
Yeah, but also instead of walking in and trying to find the differences, and this is a big one, that I always say around International Women's Day, for example. You go to these amazing events, breakfast or lunch or whatever, and they put someone on the stage that's supposed to be inspiring and really uplifting, and the person on the stage is, but the people sitting watching the person on the stage, oh my God, she's amazing, I could never be as good as her, right? And that's the judgment thing. Instead of sitting there and saying, oh wow, I do that too, I've got that quality too, or I did that, but I did that for the local soccer club, or the local, you would have, be your football club or whatever. We, instead of finding the things we have in common, we look for the things that are different, and then we judge those things.
Why do you
judge? Oh. And we judge either that they're wrong or we're not good enough, we don't keep up. There's no in between, Instead, why don't we walk in and find the things we have in common? Like, we're all human. We're human, and we all have a story, and it doesn't matter what our story is great. So something a lot of people say to me is, oh, I've had this thing in my life. It's nowhere near as big as what you've had. But I have this thing in my life. And it's like, whatever you have in your life is big for you. It doesn't matter what someone else has in their life. I tell my story because I want to really help people understand there's another way to live. And it's really easy for you to find what that is for you. I don't tell my story so people can go, wow, you're amazing. It doesn't impact my life in any way for people to say that. Yeah, it's a nice ego pat, but my ego does not lead my life. So it's, for me, I want everyone out there to know that you can find your own happiness. You can be outrageously happy in your way. And I want people to understand that somebody around you can have their outrageous happiness. It can be different to yours, and everyone's okay.
There's a lot of things you touched on, and I love that. And I'm excited to share your story and your book with everybody. And what really resonated with me and what you were saying, you're talking about judgment, but even, the same but different than judgment is, why are we always comparing?
Yeah, exactly.
Like when you said, oh, well, this happened to me, but it wasn't as bad as you. And I'm guilty of that sometimes. Like, Okay, so I had my own, I have a personal story with the injury.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't, last night I went to an event with two young liver transplant recipients and what they're going through. Well, but I didn't go through that. But guess what? Why do we belittle ourselves? Why do we, what is your take on that, Bronwen?
I think for me, it was always about not being good enough. So, like, perfect example is I had 6 centimeters of my head cut out. There were 4 different strains of cancer in the tumor when it was removed from my head. But because of where it was on my head, it grew around a nerve, and often if it grows through the nerve, it goes into the lymph nodes and then it spreads through the body. But for me, mine grew around the nerve, so they were actually able to cut the tumor out. And I had a little bit of nerve damage, but not in any way that would actually significantly impact, the way my face sits or any of that sort of stuff. And also, because it grew around the nerve and not through the nerve into the lymph nodes, I didn't have to have chemotherapy or radiation. So it took me 5 months to be able to say that I'm a cancer survivor, because I didn't deserve to say that I was a cancer survivor because I hadn't had radiation or chemotherapy. Therefore, I hadn't been sick enough to be able to actually say that I'm a cancer survivor. And it took my counsellor 5 months of work to get me to understand that having 6 centimeters of my head cut out was treatment.
Wow. Yeah.
Because I was comparing myself to how bad everybody else had it off. And I think it comes from the saying that we're taught, no matter how bad your life is, there's always somebody that's worse off. Right? That's a nice little society conditioning that we're given through a little saying that we don't even know is conditioning.
And there are so many of those sayings that you're right, that do condition us to believe a certain way and to act a certain way. And they're very influential in the way we live our life. And, it's funny that you say that, because just last night I told you I'm at this event, right? And when one of the recipients spent a year in the hospital, and he asked me, how long were you in the hospital? Oh, like nothing compared to you. Like, a couple weeks.
Half a day is my answer. Yep.
So like a couple weeks, I'm sorry. But like, I feel like, I don't have a right to be coming from this place, but I do. And you do.
You took on his stuff. You took on his stuff just then, right?
Exactly. So you're 100% right in that. And we do compare, and we do feel like our challenge, someone else is always, it's more, I don't have a right to feel this, but we have a right to feel anything and to speak it. And I love that you speak about, from your experience. And I would like to know, Bronwen, you've done something, I know you crumbled to pieces, and I know that you went through all that, and you've grown into, there's this art, I'm going to say that wrong because I always say it wrong, Kintsugi, Japanese art. So what they say
Kuntsukuri.
Yes, when you break.
Kuntsukuri, yeah.
Kuntsukuri, thank you. I need that help. I need a thesaurus or something. But anyway, so
I love it.
When something breaks, they consider it more valuable, because they, like, if a piece of pottery were to break, they repair it with 24 karat gold, so it becomes more valuable. So breaking, be it something physical or something emotional, you're actually repairing yourself and becoming more valuable to yourself, valuable to those around you. But more important, Bronwen, you are valuable to the world, because what you're doing is you're taking your experiences, and you made a choice to change the lives of others. And I think it's freaking amazing. But I have a question for you. So I don't like to think of anything as a failure, but, what is your, I know you've been through, you've expressed, the cancer and the breakdown. But I would like you to share, if you can, a time in life where you feel that you failed. So I don't like that word, and how you overcame it.
Yes. Okay, so at the same time as I had my my cancer and my breakdown, the company that I'd worked for nearly 10 years financially collapsed. So I was the chief operating officer, and I had, all staff and everything else, and I felt like I had failed them and their families, because the company that I was at in the executive suite of collapsed from under them, and all of a sudden their livelihoods were gone. So while I'm in 1,000 pieces or 1,000,000 pieces on the floor trying to recover, I was also going through the guilt and the shame and all of that sort of stuff of having, the business that I was one of the executives of collapse and financially and basically be gone, and all those families, I felt like I'd ruined their lives. Every single one of them have gone on and they've got jobs elsewhere and they're all okay and all of that sort of stuff, but I carried that for years, and I carried that for years through my recovery.
Wow.
So, there are so many reasons why being free of that has made my life go in different directions in different ways, and it has opened doors for me to do things so differently. I guess, the biggest one of those was I didn't have to worry about trying to rush back to a job. That if that had been there, that pull to go back and actually be responsible for everyone and all of those sorts of things probably would have been very strong for me. So it was a gift for me not to have that, and to give myself the extra time that I needed to really recover. And over time, it really was for me just that giving myself as much love as I would give to anybody else. So, if there's a situation where something's happening in my life, I really had to start to step into an external view and say, if this was one of my best friends that was going through this and I was having this conversation with them, what would I say to them? And how much love would I give them right now? And I had to learn to give that to myself. And that really was the only way that I got through that. And there's so many things that go into every organization, every company. There's so many decisions that were made outside me by people who, were the directors and all of that sort of stuff. But I had taken so much of that on board myself, and taken on board so much responsibility for other people's actions and the things that other people were doing, that was never mine to take. That's a really big learning for me, was really learning what's mine and what's not. And one of the best ways I've learned to do that is asking questions. So one of my favorite questions I ask is, what if it's wrong? What if that's wrong? So somebody comes to me and says, you have to do this. We're in LA recently, and it's like, you've got to go here and you've got to do this and you've got to see this. First question I ask is that right for me? What if that's wrong? Is that right for me? And I will immediately put time between what somebody's sending at me, and that shuts down the autopilot response, so that I'm consciously connecting and consciously making my decisions about what I want to do and what I don't want to do. And so, and in that same frame, is this mine or is this not mine? Is that my responsibility? It's like I just said to you, then you're taking on that guy's stuff where he's saying, how long were you in the hospital? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I was in for 2 weeks. And you just own that. That's my story. My story is just as great as someone else's. It actually doesn't matter what the story is. It's your life. You're living it. You're here to master whatever you're here to master. It's not up to me to determine whether or not that's good, bad, or otherwise. It's literally just, is that right for me? Do I need to know more about this? Is this my responsibility? Just start asking the questions.
And those are that's great. It's along the lines of my way of thinking, which with my book, live less out of habit and more with intention.
Yeah.
Yes. Right. But because we do, we don't take the time. We don't take the time to decide if that's something that we want to do. If we truly want to, how does that feel? How does that resonate with me? Or do you just act? We just start acting and doing everything that we feel we're supposed to do. So you said you're in LA. go to Disneyland, go to Magic Mountain. And I'm just hypothetically speaking. I know you love Disneyland, but they're telling you.
Hang on. John loves Disneyland.
Okay, well, John loved Disneyland, but you feel like you're in LA in California and you're supposed to do these certain things. But is that what I want to do, or is that what I've been taught to do? And what I also really like that you said is, what you went through with the company closing, and your feeling of responsibility for other people's actions, which you have no control over whatsoever, which you realize, but at that point in time,
and you don't even know about most of them,
Yeah.
So you're taking responsibility for this overarching situation that's created by so many tiny little moments that have been contributed by so many other people that you don't even know about, and just blindly stepping in and taking responsibility for things that just would never mind to take, So, and we do so much of that in our lives.
So much, and what a burden to lift off your shoulders once you get to the place where you are, and you no longer take on that responsibility for everybody else, just yourself, which is why I have you on this show. And what are your future plans? What are your goals for yourself and for what you're doing to spread your message and to help other people? What's on your agenda?
Yeah, my agenda. I guess my number one goal is to maintain. I have a really cool life. I love my life. It's so much fun. I get to spend so much time talking to people like you from all over the world, and having these conversations that just go globally. I have no idea where they end up. And people send me messages from all sorts of different places in the world. Oh my God, I've just read your book. I just heard you on a podcast. And I've immediately done this. That for me is like the ultimate coolness. So my number one goal is to maintain the coolness in my life, because it's just so much fun. And who would have thought that I'd be saying that about my life? Because my life used to be complete drudgery, right? It used to be misery. And that's what I thought life was supposed to be like. So to have experienced this and have the opportunity to experience life in a very different way, that's like my number one. Number two, my next book's coming out not long before Christmas, and I'm also working with Connie Fife from Talent Concierge. So now, stepping onto some of the world's largest stages. And pretty much I just want to keep teaching people that there's a different way to live. So, that's what's next for me. And however that unfolds, however that comes, show me all the possibilities, universe. I'm, standing here open arms, just waiting for it to happen.
Well, I think that's amazing. And I was listening to what you were saying, and it's so true. Just what you've been through has brought you to places where you're meeting people, helping people. You and I meeting in the way that we met, which is just, and you're in Australia and I'm here, and here we are. So I love it. So one more question for you, actually, too. Tell me, how do you love you, live you? And I think you've answered a lot of that, but let's be specific here.
Yeah. How do I love me, live me? Okay, so first of all, I have non-negotiable things that I have in my day. So I've done things a little bit differently today because this is my meditation time and I'm giving it to you, but I will go out of this straight into meditation. So I have non-negotiable things in my diary, and those things all relate to me. So they're the things that I need to make sure that my day is set up. So meditation, nutritious food, and movement of some sort. They are non-negotiable things in my diary. Everything else I have flexibility around. Those things I will not negotiate. They're in the diary somewhere. And live me is, for me, it's really just about making sure that, I know who I am, I know what my values are, and I make sure that my life is aligned with that, because I know that by doing that, my life is really cool and it's full of fun and laughter.
I love it. And everybody who's listening right now or watching right now, I just, I really can't say enough about Bronwen. So again, she's using her challenges to help all of you live you, love you. in it, whatever, however that looks for you. It's different for everybody. And Bronwen, how can everybody get in touch with you? How can they buy your book? How
Yep.
can they get coaching?
Yep. Okay, so everything pretty much through bronwensciortino.com. You can buy the books there. There's a contact section there where you can shoot me an email. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn. And please, any questions, any comments, I love just having a chat with people. So interface through, I pretty much spend most of my time on Facebook and Instagram. But send me an email through the contact form on the website, grab a book, go and live your life differently, and please just go have fun and find your, redefine your kind of cool. Go define your life so it's full of fun, love, and laughter.
Thank you, Bronwen, for joining me. I really appreciate it. Everybody, you know how to get in touch with her. You will, it won't ever be a mistake to reach out to her or to read her books. I've read them and they are very enlightening. And I love the steps that she has in her books. So they're personal, that you can take in order to make those changes. And really, this is, you got one shot, right? This is it. This is life. It's not a dress rehearsal. So make it the way you want it, make it live simple, Anyway, thank you for joining me, Bronwen. I appreciate it. And go on to your meditation. And thank you for making that exception with the time difference. I appreciate it. Thank you.
It's been fantastic, Kathy. I've loved our conversation.
Me too. Thank you. Bye.